Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Kidco Talk. Today we'll be doing gross motor milestones in the development of play skills. I'm Emily Burrows, our marketing coordinator here at Kids and Company. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to welcome our speaker, Tanha Patel. She's a pediatric physiotherapist at Toronto Kids Physio Group. She'll be giving an informative and engaging webinar on the gross motor milestone development in children aged 1 to 5. Hello and welcome to our Kidco Talks. Today you'll learn about key movement milestones, how physiotherapy supports early development, and simple ways to encourage motor and functional skills at home. Tanha will also cover common concerns like in-toeing, toe walking, foot posture, and frequent trips and falls. For our participants, we do have that Q&A function open. It's anonymous, so if throughout the talk you have any questions, please leave them there and we will get to them at the end. So over to you.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Emily. I'm so excited to talk to you all today. I'm going to quickly share my slides so we can get started. Like I said, I'm so excited to talk to you all about gross motor milestones today and the development of play skills. Like Emily said, feel free to just put your questions into the Q&A section and we will get to them at the end. And hopefully I might have answered some of them throughout the presentation today as well. So just a little quick introduction. Like Emily said, my name is Tanha. I'm one of the pediatric physiotherapists at Kids Physio Group, Toronto, specifically the Midtown location. Something I like to tell everybody is my job just involves me playing all day long to help babies and kids reach their milestones and physical goals. On the outside, we want all of our physiotherapy sessions to look like kids are having the best time and they're super engaged, and getting them to build their strength, coordination, balance through play. That is the best way that kids kind of learn some of these skills and the best way we can help them reach some of their physical goals. So we're going to break down some of the things we're going to talk about today during the presentation. The four main areas we're going to discuss are, one, the role of pediatric physiotherapy, kind of what we treat and when you should kind of go see a physiotherapist. Two, emerging gross motor skills ranging from 1 to 5 years old. I will be breaking this down to two categories. So we'll go from toddlerhood 1 to 3, and then also 3 to 5 for like preschool aged kids. And then we will also be diving into how you could promote these gross motor skills and functional skills at home. And for some of the common topics that usually arise in this age group are foot posture, footwear, in-toeing gait, toe walking, and trips and falls. So that's kind of the breakdown of everything we will be discussing. Okay, so the role of pediatric physiotherapy. Our kids physio clinic and services. So we are a specialized private clinic that is exclusively just for kids. So we like to say just for kids and just physio. The goal is to kind of zone in on an area and provide the best possible care, the best possible care to all the kids that come through our doors. We treat anywhere between 0 to 18 years old. And some of the common reasons why kids come to us is they might be developing typically, but parents just have questions regarding their gross motor skills. If you've noticed that your child is kind of falling behind or not doing some things that their peers are doing. So looking at atypical development, some kids with disabilities, post-injuries, for milestone checkups and education. And then we do have some specialized sessions we do as well for concussions and pelvic health. We are a clinic that is present all across Canada. We have a list right here on this slide. I will also have a little QR code at the end for you to take a look. I know some people here might not be from Canada. There are Kidco locations across the United States as well, but you would totally find a physio location near you. There might be multidisciplinary clinics that don't just do physio, but they have physio services available. Okay, So I'm going to go into some of the common reasons that people would come to see a physio at this age. One is motor milestone checkups. So a lot of parents come to us and they're not necessarily concerned, but they want to know what their child should be doing for their age. And that is something we take a look at. So that or there are cases where parents have noticed that they're having challenges with a certain skill. So we would kind of dive into if they're having issues with balance, coordination, endurance, strength, and or manipulative or ball skills. And we're kind of breaking down what area is a little bit difficult for them and how we can kind of help them achieve that and what areas we need to focus on to help them. Another common reason is variations with their alignment and gait. So two of the most common things is in toeing or out toeing. So some kids that come in that walk with their feet turned in. Some people would also call it like pigeon toe gait, or with their feet turned out. So when you come in, our main goal is to kind of determine what is causing that foot position and if intervention at their age is needed. A lot of this would include education and on what is usually typical and what might not be actually normal for what age they're at. The next thing is toe walking. So we want to determine the cause and provide appropriate intervention. And if needed, depending on their age, recommend any appropriate orthotics that they might need to help prevent the progression of the toe walking or reduce the amount of toe walking that they are doing. And the next one is flat feet. So again, a lot of these things will involve education on what is typical for their age and the development of arches and when that kind of happens. And if their presentation, if it is atypical, what the intervention can kind of look like and what we need to work on. And lastly, the main thing parents comment on in this age group is kids are starting to interact with a lot of their peers. They might be in daycare, preschool, and this is when you might see that they're not able to keep up with their peers. So that is a common comment that a lot of parents will make when they come for a assessment. And so we want to make sure that we're building their confidence and they're progressing appropriately for the gross motor skills that they should be doing. So first we will start with the emerging skills of a toddler and go through some of the skills that we want to see at 1 to 3 years old. So I've written here transition from babyhood to toddlerhood. So even if we have a kid that comes as 2 or 3, we are always kind of looking back at the first 12 months of their life. These skills that they are developing in the first 12 months are going to be crucial to help them progress and develop their future skills. So rolling, for example, they're working on crossing midline. They're using a lot of their core muscles to do that. Crawling, it works on coordination, cross-body movement, developing a lot of their core and glute muscles in that position. Sitting independently challenges their core stability and independence. And pulling to stand and cruising is very important for hip development. So as you can imagine, if they're skipping or haven't achieved some of those skills in the first 12 months, they may have some difficulties with their future skills as they just didn't get the time to develop some of those the strength from being in those positions. So not doing that skill and also maybe compensating and doing the skill in a way that we wouldn't expect them to or want them to can also lead to kind of challenges later on with their more advanced skills. So we will always go back to look at what they were doing in the first 12 months. So 12 months to 3 years is a whole new world of learning, developing social skills and peer play. Once they start walking, it is important to give them a little bit of time to walk. They need a little a couple of months to develop their balance, coordination, and get really confident in that position before we kind of look ahead to the next skills. Another very key part of this age is they are developing physically, but they're really figuring things out cognitively as well. They're discovering, okay, at a playground, how do I get from one place to another? How am I going to climb up this obstacle? And they are really using their cognitive skills to help them with their physical skills. So we're working towards increasing their body awareness and exploration. They're developing coordination of movement. Another thing is they're working on proprioception, so figuring out how their body, their arms and legs are moving in space. And they're starting to learn more advanced skills of how to run, jump, and balance on one leg. Developing all these skills are going to be so important to establish a good pattern of movement and then help them be able to play and participate in the community and interact with their peers. So the main takeaway for this stage is exploration is going to be key. So we want to give our toddlers the space and environments to be able to explore and learn new skills, obviously within reason, and keep making sure they're safe, but that is the best way to encourage some of their gross motor skills to kind of develop. Okay, so on this next two slides, we're kind of going to break down some of the gross motor skills we expect at this age and what the skills are and what they should be doing for each skill. So first is stairs. Around 18 months to 2 years old, what we expect to see is a step up pattern. So they're going left leg, bringing their right leg together on the same step, or they're going right leg, left leg, with some handrail support. And then when they're coming down, it would be descending through crawling. And then 2 to 3 year old skills, same thing. We're looking for a reciprocal gait pattern with handrail support, which means they're going left, right, left, right. They're kind of alternating. And then when they're coming down the stairs, we're doing a step two pattern, which is again, left and then bringing their right foot on the same step with handrail support. One thing I do want to note for stairs when we are doing a step two pattern, we want to kind of see that they're able to do this with both legs. They should be able to do left foot first and bring the right together, and then also right foot first and then bring their left. We don't necessarily want them to have any strong preferences or dominance for using one side over the other at this age. Up until they are 3 years old, they should be able to use both sides of their body pretty symmetrically, and that's the age we would be able to actually say if they're going to be like left-handed or right-handed, or be left leg dominant or right leg dominant. But before that age, we do want to see them use a little bit of both sides. And then for single leg balance, 18 months to 2 years old, there's not like a time period we're looking for, and they may attempt it momentarily, but more so at 2 to 3 years old, we want to see them be able to balance on one leg for 1 to 2 seconds. So something you could do is when you're putting their shoes on, are they able to kind of lift their foot up to put a shoe on? That's about the 1 to 2 seconds. Or when they're walking, are they able to kind of navigate an obstacle? So step over something that's a little bit taller. That's 1 to 2 seconds of them lifting one foot off the ground to kind of clear that hurdle. And then jumping. 18 months to 2 years old, this is when this skill is starting to emerge, and they might do a stagger jump. So they're kind of pushing off of one foot more than the other, and they might also kind of land with one foot more than the other. They might do this on the spot, or they might even attempt to do that forwards. Between the 2 to 3 year old stage, there are three main jumping skills we're kind of looking for. A double leg jump forwards approximately 4 inches. And this is when they push off with both feet together and then land with both feet together. And then the next one would be up 2 inches and then down from a 6 to 7 inch step. What we typically see is that jumping down from a 6 to 7 inch step kind of happens first, as gravity is going to help them be able to do that. So they might be like jumping off the bottom of the step on the stairs, jumping off your couch, stuff like that, is what we typically would start to see first, as jumping forward and up just requires a little bit more power and hip glute strength to be able to achieve that. And then we have our next skills that are our ball skills, catching and throwing. One thing to note for catching and throwing, and something we always want to check in on, is if a child's been actually exposed or has had the chance to use a ball and play with a ball. Sometimes any delays you might be noticing could just be because they've just not had the chance to do that yet, unless we're seeing delays with catching and throwing and some of their other skills as well. Not every kid is inclined to play with a ball or has had the chance yet, so you do want to give them the opportunity to do so, to see how they're kind of doing. But 18 to 2 years old for catching, they're kind of just getting ready. They put their arms out to attempt to catch at this stage, and then between the 2 to 3-year-old stage, they put their arms out and they may trap the ball against their body, with like a huge arm movement at that stage. And then throwing for 18 to months to 2 years old, we're saying it starts to emerge, but babies are probably throwing at 10, 11 months. You give them food, they might be throwing it. But there's not a lot of difference from 18 months to 3 years old. They are not really using a lot of their trunk rotation to throw. Their feet are kind of staying in one position. They're mostly just using their arms to throw at this stage. Okay, just some things to consider on some of the skills that we just talked about is you want to follow your own child's development curve. We have averages for when a child should achieve a skill, but we also want to take a look at how they have been achieving their previous skills. If they were early to do some of their skills like sitting, crawling, walking, I would expect that jumping and stairs and balancing might also happen a little bit earlier, but that goes the same for kids who are slightly behind on their earlier skills. They might also be a little bit behind on their balancing, jumping skills, but we want to kind of just follow their development curve. In those early years, like I mentioned, we shouldn't really have a dominant side or discrepancy in strength from one side to another. Children may have slight preferences for using one leg, but when cued and asked to use the other, we shouldn't see that one side is a lot more effortful for them to do than the other side. It should be pretty similar, especially before the 3 years age. If we are noticing a dominant side, this can hinder their ability to achieve that double leg jump because they're pushing off and feel more confident and strong through that one side than the other. So a discrepancy in strength could be a reason why a child might be delayed for that jumping skill. And then if your child had skipped or missed any previous skills, like we discussed, like rolling or crawling, they might have trouble with some of the toddler skills, but that is why we are here to help, and we can build the muscles that we need strengthened to help them achieve that skill. And lastly, we all learn through exposure. Like I said, if a toddler's never picked up a ball, we don't expect them to meet this milestone right away. And if they'd have a lot of time to practice and they're still having a hard time figuring that skill out, again, this is a great point to kind of check in with a pediatric physiotherapist. Okay, so promoting skills with your toddler. So some things you can kind of do with them to help develop their gross motor skills. So one is just being active. Kids need a lot of time to just play and be active and explore movement. So they need to be able to try things and be like, oh, that didn't work out, and try a different way. And they will learn through problem solving. You just sometimes giving them the opportunity may be what's needed to help them achieve this skill. And then two, getting outside to the park and playgrounds. Park and playgrounds are one of the best ways to help with so many of their motor milestones. They have great structures for kids to problem solve with their minds and bodies, to work on balancing, to step between surfaces, trying to visit different parks that have different structures can be really helpful. And also they get to see and interact with other children. So seeing someone else try something might motivate them to try and figure it out themselves. So it's a great opportunity to have fun, but also engage in developing their gross motor skills. And then the next one is climbing. So obviously with supervision and safety, climbing fences or short trees, or now playgrounds have like the climbing structures, being able to do that would be really helpful as well. So it's like we're encouraging safe, risky play. And then lastly, making a game out of it. This is always the best way to make it fun, but exciting for a toddler. So if they have siblings, racing each other or racing their siblings, making it a little challenge, like who could bounce the longest on the beam, or who can froggy jump the farthest, to really push them to try their best. And one of our favorite ways to work on some of their gross motor skills is animal walks. So there's lots of different variations of animal walks. You could also search them up. You'll find many online as well. But some examples I've listed here are bear walks. They kind of walk on their hands and feet. And this is really helpful for shoulder and hip stability, core strength. A flamingo stance. I always like to ask, like, okay, we're going to stand like a flamingo, and we want to try to balance on one leg for as long as we can. The third is frog jumps. These are really great for hip, knee, ankle mobility and a lot of strength. This is particularly a good activity for kids with in-toeing posture. And then lastly, we have crab walks. So working on shoulder and hip stability, core strength, and coordination. Again, for all of these things, you could always incorporate it into a game. A bear is scavenging for food, hide some things around your house, hopping from one lily pad to another, putting some markers on the ground. This is also helpful to kind of gauge how far they're able to jump. Flamingo is trying to stay very still or play. I like to also do like statue game to have them balance as for long as possible. They're going to be playing while working on their core, cross-body movement, strength, and endurance. Okay, so for the next section, we're going to be talking about the skills that are emerging for around the preschooler age of 3 to 5 years old. So this is the transition now from toddlerhood to preschool. Transitioning into preschool comes with a lot of new experiences. They're learning so much about physical literacy and body awareness. There's going to be new obstacles in the classroom, lots of new surfaces for them to walk and explore on. They will need to figure out how to kind of adjust their bodies and be able to balance in order to prevent falls. And not just physically, they're starting to learn more fundamental movements. So we break them down into 3 categories at this stage. So we're looking at stationary, locomotion, and then manipulative skills. So the fundamental skills that we're expecting for this age, like I mentioned, we have broken them down into 3 categories. So stationary are skills that are just performed on the spot, something like balancing, bending, twisting, lifting. Locomotion, skills that incorporate traveling across the floor or surface, which include things like rolling, jumping, hopping, running, galloping. And then manipulative ball skills, so controlling of different objects such as balls, primarily with the hands or feet, or also just can involve rackets or bats. So we're looking at bouncing, throwing, catching, kicking, striking. So for 3 to 5, we're going to discuss all of them broken in down into these 3 categories. So as you can see here, I will go through what we're looking for at each stage, but the thing I'll mention overall is from 3 to 5 years old, there's not a lot of new skills that we're looking at. A lot of the skills are still, we're looking at jumping, we're looking at balancing, we're looking at their ball skills, but the thing that's changing is how long they should be able to do it, the distance that they're jumping, the height that they're jumping, and their quality of movement. So for stationary skills, and mainly balancing. At 3 years old, we're looking to see that they can stand on one foot for 3 to 5 seconds, and then 4 years old standing on one foot for 5 to 10 seconds, and 5 years old standing on one foot for 10 plus seconds. And then for 3 years old, for jumping, we're looking to see that they could jump forward approximately 24 inches over a little hurdle that's 1 to 2 inches and down from a step. And then 4 years old, again, the distance that they're jumping is 30 inches now over a 6-inch hurdle and still that 6 to 7-inch step. And the other thing for locomotion is being able to walk backwards on a beam or line. The biggest change that happens for 3 to 4 years old with the jumping is we were just working on 2-leg jumping, but at 4 years old, now we're also looking at single leg hopping. So at 4, we want to see that kids are able to kind of do 5 hops on both legs. Going back to what we talked about of dominance and having a stronger side or a strong preference, this is where we might start to notice some of those discrepancies as we're working on more single leg activities. If a child has had a strong preference for using one side of their body, let's say their left, then we might see that they're able to do those 5 hops on the left, but not fully be able to do that on the right. So that is still something we want to work on, as a preference is okay for them to have, but we want them to be able to do their gross motor skills still symmetrically. So that 5 jumps we should be able to do on both sides. And then for 5-year-olds, 5-year-old skills for jumping, they're still similar to 4-year-old like above, but then we're also looking to see if they can jump onto an elevated surface and be able to jump and turn 180 degrees. So those are kind of new. And then for our manipulative ball skills, at 3 years old, they are putting their hands out to catch, and they still might catch against their body, and they're still throwing with just their hands. And then 4 years old, they start to catch the ball with their hands and not trapping the ball against their body. And they start to involve some trunk rotation to help them get some more power behind that throw, but their feet are still kind of planted on the ground. And then at 5 years old, they are able to cleanly catch with 2 hands. They will use that trunk rotation and a step through to throw. It's getting more, they're using more parts of their body to get that power behind their throw, and their quality of movement is also improving. So promoting skills with your preschooler. Some of the things we talked about previously still apply. Having them engage with kids, be active and learn through exploring movement is still very important. And then some of the other things you could try for this age is there's a lots of like home workouts or videos you could play, like Cosmic Kids Yoga, Peloton for Families, Kids Bob, Get Kids Moving, that can be great for engaging them in play while also working on their skills. And then playing something that's popular is play turn-taking games. So I usually like, okay, I'll go first and then you could copy me, or I'll have you go first and then I'll copy you. So you both are kind of working together. And then at this stage, putting them in any kind of activity can be really helpful. Karate, swimming, sport ball, skating, gymnastics are just listed there. But truly at this stage, it's finding something that they kind of enjoy will be the best thing for them. So if they're really into swimming, great. You can put them in swimming. All of these sports and activities are going to be working on strengthening and coordination in some way. Okay, so we're going to go into those frequently asked questions that a lot of parents come to us with. And the first one is foot posture and footwear. So before the age of 9 to 10, as it says, arch development will start in preschool years, but completes around that stage. So when babies start walking and kids that are younger, they have a fat pad in the place where the arches will grow. So it gives the appearance of having flat feet. But the other thing we want to note is it just that they don't have the arch, which is making it look like they have flat feet, or we're looking up the chain at their ankles to see if they're kind of collapsing in. So we're going to look at that alignment, and then we're also going to look out for frequent tripping and falling and complaints of pain. Those are great indicators that we could seek out a physiotherapist's help. And then footwear for this stage, the best thing for kids is to be barefoot when they're at home specifically. That is really what's going to help build the intrinsic muscles of their feet so they are able to develop their arch up until they're 9 to 10 years old. However, when they're in school or daycare, something that's flexible and breathable is best, giving them enough space at their toes for them to be able to splay their toes and work on their balance. And then activity really isn't so, or if they need specific shoes for specific activities at school. For those kids, something that's important will be, yes, it's flexible and breathable, but the sole of the shoe at the back, we should be pretty supportive. Like we don't want it to be too flexible straight at the back of the shoe. That's where they're going to get that little bit of ankle support. So that's something we usually would recommend. Okay, and then going into in-toeing. So kids that kind of walk or stand with their feet turned in. It is very typical in this age, and it is something that can resolve between 5 to 8 years old. But some of the things you're kind of looking out for or that are going to be indicators for you to kind of reach out to a pediatric physiotherapist is going to be frequent trips or falls, any delays in gross motor skills. If you're noticing that their foot is turning in more on one side than the other side, so an asymmetrical presentation, and kind of does a lot of that W sitting. So they have their feet kind of turned in and their bum is in between their legs. If they're doing a lot of that sitting, that can also lead to some observation of in-toeing. Okay, so going into that W sit, it's nodding hurt if it's a dominant position. So some kids at this stage might sit in a W, but if that's not their primary position of sitting, it's not usually a concern. It can be just because it's comfortable position for them to be in. But if that is how they're sitting a majority of the time, we do want to kind of discourage that position as it doesn't put their joints in a good positions for healthy development and growth of their bones. So what can happen is they're still growing, so their bones can grow in the direction that they're kind of being pulled in. So if they're sitting in that position, they're kind of turning their bones in a little bit, which is not great if they're sitting in that for a long period. It can, like I said, promote that in-toeing walking pattern and it doesn't actually encourage typical strengthening of their core muscles, which will then cause a domino effect in the development of their gross motor skills. So if they're not really working on their core strength, having a solid core and really strong at your core is going to be important for them to be able to move their arms and legs around appropriately. So if you're noticing that they're kind of doing some flailing movements, when they're like running or doing activities, that could be due to a lack of core strength. So we always want to work on developing that core strength, so they also avoid sitting in that W sit. And then if they are using it as a dominant sitting pad, we want to kind of figure out why in order to correct any inefficiencies. Typically, a lot of kids will sit in that position, one, because they have that mobility to be able to do so, and two, they may have started because of a lack of core strength. That position just gives them such a stable base of support that they find that the most comfortable to be in, and they can kind of turn off their tummy muscles. And the last thing is really trying to practice other types of sitting. So a lot of the times just nagging them or telling them, okay, can't sit like that, isn't always helpful, as a lot of them will naturally go back into that position. So what we want to do is just practice other types of sitting. So doing a side sit, crisscross sitting, even on something unstable like a cushion, long sitting with their feet out in front of them, or if all of those things are still not working, just having them sit up at a higher surface can really be helpful, just to avoid them sitting in that W sit for prolonged periods. And then the next one is toe walking. So the main thing is we want to check in if it's occurring more than 70 to 80% of the time. Initially, when kids start standing and doing a little bit of toe walking, they might be on their toes, but we want to see progress and improvements with them bringing their feet down. So after 4 to 6 months of them walking, they are still going up on their toes. Or if they are more than 2 years of age and they've been starting to toe walk, is a good indication to kind of go check in with the physiotherapist. We never want to wait and see for these kids, as the longer they're walking on their toes, this can lead to them shortening their calf muscles and pulling on their heel cords, which can cause some pain at their heels. They're really learning to shift their base of support forwards, which can affect their balance. So they're learning how to balance while being on their tippy toes. And when they're asked to kind of bring their heels down, figuring out how to balance in that position can get challenging. And then they are developing the inefficient use of their neck, hip, bum, and lower leg muscles by being on their toes as well. And we could start to see delays with other gross motor skills because of that. There are many causes for toe walking, so it would be a great idea to check in to see what is the reason for your child. And then the intervention will obviously depend on the cause, but we're making sure that we're addressing any kind of muscle tightness, and if there is a sensory component, working on that as well. Okay, and then the last question that we get quite a bit is frequent trips and falls. So this is very common for toddlers, especially early walkers, as they are still figuring out how to navigate and change direction and step over things. They are more likely just to fall at this stage, as they're figuring out that skill. But if it is still occurring often and frequently beyond the early walking stage, we want to help determine the underlying cause. It can be muscle inefficiencies, issues with foot posture, alignment, and lower extremities. So any kids that walk with their foot turned in, being in that position, it's harder to clear their foot and clear any obstacles because they're not getting that full heel toe pattern. So that could be a reason that they're falling. You might notice that they're tripping over their own feet a lot. So if you're noticing frequent trips and falls, that is also a common reason why you want to kind of see if there's anything causing that. And then lastly, personality can be a factor. I have kids all the time who will kind of fall for fun because it's funny. But we want to make sure there's actually nothing causing them to trip frequently. Okay, that's all for the whole presentation. Like I mentioned, there's 3 Toronto locations, but we also have clinics all across Canada. So I have put in also a QR code there for you if you wanted to scan it and take a look. But we have our website listed, the Instagram, and also my email. So if anyone ever has any questions, you could feel free to reach out. I would be happy to get back to you. But that's it for the presentations, and we could go into any questions that anybody has.
Hi, thank you so much. That was such a great presentation and answered a lot of key questions that many of our parents have. Um, but let's go through these Q&A questions here. And if anyone has any additional questions, please leave them below and we'll try to get to them. First, we have here, are these preferences you mentioned only concerning before 3 years old?
So, when they have one thing I'll talk about is like the difference between having a preference and a dominant side. Before 3 years old, kids can have slight preferences. When you ask them to do something, they might be like, oh, I'm going to use my left leg or my right leg. But we don't want to see a dominant side. So every time they do something, they always choose that one side. Or if asked to do the other side, it's very challenging for them to do so. So before 3 years, especially before 3 years of age, that is something we're looking at. And after 3, we are still looking to see if they're able to do skills both sides. So their basic gross motor skills, they should be able to achieve with both legs or both hands. But anything above that, like kicking a ball more with one side, that's okay, but they should be able to do some of their other gross motor skills pretty symmetrically. But it is something we really focus in on before 3 years of age.
Thank you for that. Our next question here is my 2-year-old has always had great motor skills, gross motor skills. He is in preschool now. What activity or sport is good for his age to start?
So he's 2 in preschool. Okay. Like I mentioned, at this stage, honestly, any activity is really going to be good for kids. Them just being active and getting the chance to interact with kids is the most important. So I'll always kind of ask what they're interested in because they're more likely to stick to it if they are having fun and being engaged. So overall, just for gross motor development, any activity is going to be great. Specifically, swimming is a great one. I like to tell all parents, one, it's great to learn safety in the water, but also it really does help develop a lot of muscle strength. But if there's something that they are really keen on, I would put them in that.
Thank you. Here we have wearing socks indoor for cold weather or keep them barefoot for that development. So it's just asking about like socks instead of indoor shoes at daycare or in cold weather months.
So that's a great question. In the cold weather, yes, of course, you're going to put socks on time to time, but at home, I would really try in those early years to be be barefoot as much as possible. That is going to be really the best way to develop their foot intrinsic muscles. Um, Obviously, it doesn't need to be every single day that they're barefoot at home, but as much as you can is ideal. And then in the winter months, if we need to put our socks on, that's okay. We could kind of do more of that in the summer as well.
Thank you for that. And then this question here is, do you recommend any specific brands or shoe styles for toddlers that have a wide toe box and support ankles?
So I can totally send some resources to Emily afterwards as well for you to share with everyone here, because that is a common question we get asked. But 2 brands that come to my mind right away are like there's Geox shoes, which are really great. And then especially for kids who you're noticing any kind of ankle collapse in, they have a very good supportive back. And then Asics shoes are pretty good as well. You just want to make sure you're getting the appropriate size for your child. Like if it's too tight or too big, you might notice them walking a little bit weird. So we want to try to have them fit into a shoe that's like gonna fit really well for them.
I also wanted to mention that kids and company families also have access to Stones, which are shoes that are made for flexible feet and wide toe boxes. So if anyone is looking for the discount for Stones, that can be found in your partner website portal. Here, next question is from my child is 2 years old and mostly sitting in a W position. Is that concerning, and should I be asking his teachers to correct him at daycare?
So, like I mentioned, if it's their primary position of sitting, they're constantly sitting in a W, I would try to encourage them to come out of it as much as possible. Just trying those different sitting positions at daycare, encouraging or at school, the crisscross sitting, or having them sit up a little bit more will be helpful for sure. So I would try to change up their sitting position as much as possible, and just kind of monitor to see if you're noticing on those secondary concerns like turning in of their feet or delays to indicate when it'd be a good time to see a physio or if it's needed.
Thank you. And here we have, is bike riding a good skill to help these developments as well?
Yeah, so bike riding is a really good way to develop skills. So there's so many different variations that you could find. There's like early ride-ons that are lower to the ground, tricycles. So um, you can start using those early ride-ons like 18 plus months if they've been walking for a little while, and then 2.5 to 3 transition to a tricycle or balance bike. It really just depends on what they are doing gross motor wise and what area you want to work on, but it's really good for building their leg strength and core strength. So it's a perfect skill to kind of be doing to help progress some of their other gross motor skills.
Thank you. And then here we also have, this question might be more specific, but my 5-year-old daughter has been recommended pelvic physio to deal with some bladder issues. What can I expect at a pelvic physio appointment for kids?
So, I'm not a pelvic physiotherapist myself. However, we do have one on the team. So I know a little bit. So during a pelvic health assessment, a lot of it is going to be, one, it doesn't have to be invasive or anything like that. A lot of it will be the just getting to know a little bit more about your kids, a lot of questions, and looking to see what their core strength looks like, and focusing in on what aspect is a little bit difficult. So it's all going to be a lot of education usually provided. And it doesn't need to be anything invasive at all, especially the first session. We even on our website or our Instagram and pages, we have more information on what that pelvic health session can look like if you are interested. But that's just like a little brief of what the assessment could look like for your child.
Thank you for that. And here we have, I've noticed that my child's ankles are collapsing in. When is it a concern, and is there anything I can do right now?
Usually a lot of kids have a lot of like mobility at their ankles in the early stages. We just want to monitor to see if it's kind of improving as they're weight bearing and start walking and doing more activities in an upright position. When you should be concerned, one, like we mentioned, if they're not achieving some of their gross motor skills again, if they're complaining of any kind of pain in their ankles, if they are falling often, those are all great indicators to check in. Or if you're also noticing that the ankle pronation is more significant on one side than the other, so any kind of asymmetries, you would want to also check in with the therapist. Something you can start doing though is important is supportive footwear. So usually we do want a very flexible and breathable shoe, but for kids that are presenting with that ankle pronation, they might benefit from a slightly more supported shoe. So something that's not too flexible, that has that really solid heel cup, or something even a little bit high top can be really helpful in working on improving their ankle alignment in the meantime.
Thank you. And then we have this question here. Is there any exercises I should be doing with my child now while they're developing?
One, it would depend on what age they are. So if there's a specific age you're looking at, but like I mentioned, there's not like I'm not gonna have them go, okay, we're gonna squat now or things like that. I wouldn't focus in on any exercises, but just involving them in any activities or those animal walks would be great. Frog jumps are a great one to encourage a lot of different muscle strengthening and mobility. So any kind of activities like that would be perfect. It doesn't need to be focused in exercises, especially if you don't have any specific concerns or if they're kind of at age appropriate. It's more so important for them to be just active.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question here. Um, you have, should I be worrying about the weight of the shoe that my child is wearing?
So sometimes that can affect if they're getting a new pair of shoes and you put them on and they start to walk a little bit funny. That does happen sometimes because the shoe just might be a little bit heavier than they're used to, and they're just trying to figure out how to walk with it. But there's not a specific weight, I would say, that is like, oh, it's too heavy. You do want to give them a chance to get used to a shoe. So there's always going to be that slight period where their gait might look a little bit awkward, but that's okay. Especially I find like with winter boots, like rain boots, things like that, they're a little bit more chunkier, so they might start to walk kind of funny, like they're waddling, but you should start to see that improve again as they kind of practice using them.
Okay, thank you so much. And unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but if we didn't get to you, please write them down and you can send them off to us after the webinar and we will get them to Tanha and hopefully get you a response as soon as possible. But I wanted to thank you so much for your talk today. It was so insightful and it's really helpful when we can have these Q&As at the end and answer some more personal and specific questions about our families and their kids. And thank you to everyone for coming on today. We love having your questions in the chat throughout, and it's always great to be able to have that live conversation. I want to remind you that there'll be a recording sent out to anyone who registered, as well as if you were on today, as well as some links to some helpful resources from Kids Physio Group and to find Tanha as well, and just to learn more. As you leave the webinar, there'll be a quick survey that pops up. So if you want to take a moment to leave us and Tanha some feedback, we'd be greatly appreciated for that. So thank you so much again, and we'll see everyone next month for our next Kidco Talk.
Thank you so much. It was great
Thank you so
chatting to you
much.
all.